I never believed in love at first sight, not until Daniel smiled at me during a charity book fair, handing me a copy of The Little Prince with a post-it that said, "For the girl who still sees stars." We were different in all the obvious ways. He wore tailored jackets and spoke fluent Latin. I wore bookstore tote bags and had a chipped keychain from my first job. But somehow, we worked. He listened when I spoke, made space for my silence, and laughed like my thoughts were magic. When we danced at his friend's wedding and he whispered, "You make rooms feel like home," I believed him. Every word. 6 months in, I met his family. They lived in the kind of house that echoes, 3 stories, high ceilings, polished floors that click under nervous heels. His mother, Elaine, kissed my cheek with precision. His father, Robert, nodded with the warmth of a boardroom introduction. His sister Claire smiled, but her eyes flicked down to my shoes, and something behind them dimmed. I remember that first dinner. The table was long enough to seat 12, but we were only 5. The food was plated like art, each course explained like a museum exhibit. I spent more time trying to remember which fork to use than actually tasting anything. Claire asked what I did, and when I told her I was a senior editor at a mid-sized publishing house, she nodded vaguely. "So, like, book TikTok?" I smiled, unsure if it was meant to be funny. Still, I thought I held my own. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, his thumb brushing mine like reassurance. "And afterward," he said, "they liked you." "I promise. They're just reserved." I wanted to believe that. I convinced myself every cool smile, every loaded compliment, every overly generous offer to help with the wedding budget was their version of kindness. That some families love quietly, in crisp white linens and barely touched wine glasses. I thought that if I smiled enough, said thank you often enough, dressed well enough, I could belong. When we got engaged, it felt like proof that I had been accepted. The proposal was intimate, just us on a rainy rooftop with fairy lights and Daniel's hand shaking as he opened the box. The ring was understated, a delicate oval set on a thin band, chosen, he said, because it looks like something you'd wear if no one was watching. I cried. Said yes. Called my mother, who cried too. Daniel's family, however, hosted a formal dinner 2 weeks later, an engagement celebration with hand-addressed invitations and a dress code that required me to buy a new dress. Nothing too loud, Elaine texted, just something elegant and timeless. At the dinner, I laughed at the right jokes, answered polite questions about my childhood, and tried to keep up with Claire's commentary on destination wedding venues. Daniel sat beside me, quiet but steady, as if his presence was enough to anchor me. Maybe it would have been, if not for the moment that changed everything. Claire's phone buzzed on the table. She had stepped away to take a call earlier and forgotten it when she returned. I wasn't trying to pry. But when the phone lit up, my name was there, tagged in a message. And the group chat's name was impossible to miss. Inner Circle Ring. The last message, glowing softly on the screen, read, "Can we please address the elephant in the room? She's lovely, but I'm getting exhausted pretending she's the one." I froze. My heart, once steady, began to stumble. And just like that, the room around me shifted. For a moment, the world didn't move. Claire's phone sat there like a lit fuse on the linen tablecloth, elegant, unbothered, unaware it had just cracked something open. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even leaning toward it. But when your name appears in a message thread you were never meant to see, your body reacts before your conscience can intervene. My eyes flicked down. She's lovely, but I'm getting exhausted pretending she's the one. Then another bubble followed, right beneath it. Daniel has a pattern, he always needs to rescue someone. There were 6 participants in the chat. I saw the names clearly. Claire. Elaine. Robert. Daniel. Olivia, his cousin. Evan, his childhood friend. It was like being locked out of a house you thought was yours, and suddenly seeing your name on a no-entry sign. I looked up, tried to keep my face still. The dinner went on. Forks clinked. A waiter refilled wine glasses. Elaine was discussing table runners for spring weddings. Daniel was distracted, his hand absent-mindedly stroking the stem of his glass. I could have said something. Asked outright. Made a scene. But that would have been too easy, and far too dramatic for a family like his. Instead, I waited. Claire picked up her phone eventually. She didn't notice anything. Her lipstick was too perfect for suspicion. Later, in the car, Daniel held my hand as he drove. "You were amazing tonight," he said. "They really see how happy you make me." I turned to look at him, really look, at the man who had once kissed the back of my hand during a rainstorm like we lived in a black and white film. And for the first time, I saw something else. Someone who had let people talk about me behind my back for months, maybe years, and said nothing. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He nodded, eyes still on the road. "What's the inner circle?" The silence was immediate. His fingers tightened on the wheel. He didn't answer right away, which told me everything. "You went through Claire's phone?" he asked softly, not accusing, just disappointed. "I didn't go through anything," I said. "It was on the table. I saw my name. I saw yours." He exhaled. A long, low sound like the slow release of air from a balloon that's been stretched too tight. "It's just a private family chat," he finally said. "We joke around. Nothing serious." "Is that what I am in there? A joke?" He didn't answer. I turned my face toward the window, let the silence wrap around us. I thought about all the dinners where I'd forced smiles. All the polite condescension I'd swallowed like wine. All the times I'd walked into a room where everyone already had a verdict, and I never even knew I was on trial. And the man who was supposed to be on my side. He had been in the jury box. The next few days passed like the soft hum of an old refrigerator, low, constant, barely noticeable until you realize how much it's filling the room. Daniel didn't bring it up again. Neither did I. He kissed me on the forehead in the mornings, made coffee, read emails. On the outside, everything still resembled love. But something was missing, some invisible thread between us had loosened. I replayed the chat in my head 100 times. The words themselves weren't vulgar. They were worse, polished, casual, coded. "She's lovely, but exhausting. A little rough around the edges. Daniel always finds strays." They didn't call me names. They didn't need to. Their judgment was too refined for that. It came dressed in well-written grammar and emojis that softened cruelty with confetti. And Daniel? He'd been quiet in the thread. But that silence. That was the part that echoed. One message in particular kept haunting me. "Let's just get through the engagement dinner. She means well." I couldn't decide which part broke me more, the condescension, or the fact that he called our engagement dinner something to get through. Like it was a layover on the way to his real life. I found myself retreating into smaller spaces. My office. Cafes. The corner of the bedroom where the sunlight came in crooked and kind. I told myself I needed to focus on work, on my authors, my deadlines. But really, I was just stalling. The conversations we weren't having began piling up like unopened letters. Then one evening, Daniel came home with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "My mom's looking at country clubs again," he said, loosening his tie. "She thinks she found one that even you'd like." He said it lightly, teasingly. The kind of joke that might have made me laugh once. This time, I didn't. "Why does she think I wouldn't like it?" He paused, taken off guard. "You know what I mean," he said. "She's trying. Everyone is." "No," I said, quietly but firmly. "They're performing. There's a difference." He sat down across from me. The room felt suddenly too quiet. Too bare. I don't understand what you want me to do, Em. I looked at him, really looked at him. And I realized he didn't. He had grown up in this, families that didn't talk directly, feelings smoothed over with Chardonnay, conflict hidden under dry wit and floral centerpieces. He thought this was normal. I wanted you to defend me, I said finally. Not behind their backs. Not after the fact. I wanted to know I wasn't alone at that table. He looked down, ashamed, or maybe just tired. I didn't think it would matter. That's the problem. The morning I left, it was raining. Not the cinematic kind, not dramatic thunder or floods, just a soft, endless drizzle that made everything feel like it was dissolving. I hadn't packed everything. Just enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to remember who I was before I started editing myself to fit their world. Daniel was still asleep. He looked peaceful, even kind, tangled in the sheets we picked out together from a store I couldn't afford. I watched him for a moment, wondering how long I'd been in love with the idea of him. The man who once surprised me with pastries from the bakery I mentioned in passing. The man who kissed me on bookstore steps. The man who, when it mattered, didn't speak. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. Everything I hadn't said was already folded into the silence we'd built between us. I moved into a friend's spare bedroom. Nothing fancy. The window sticks. The radiator hums too loud at night. But it feels mine. And slowly, quietly, I began to feel like me again. No rehearsed smiles. No second guessing what to wear to dinner. No checking my words for polish and pedigree. Just breath. Books. Music. Sleep that came without the weight of pretending. A week later, Daniel showed up. He didn't call ahead. Just stood outside the apartment building, holding a folded umbrella and a face full of what-ifs. I didn't know you were hurting that much, he said. I nodded. You didn't ask. He swallowed. I thought love was enough. I smiled. It is. But respect is the part that makes it last. He looked like he wanted to say more, but for once, he didn't. And I appreciated that. Because some endings don't need speeches. They just need truth. I never posted about the breakup. Never responded to the quiet whispers that followed. Claire sent me a long message, part apology, part PR statement. Elaine sent a wedding gift back with a note that read "Return to sender." I smiled. Some people only know how to love conditionally. That's their limit. And I no longer live within it.